My guest is Mark Midkiff. He is the Vice President of Architectures. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So we were just chatting briefly before we jumped on. You've been with this company for how many years?
Coming up 45 years.
When was the company started?
1956. So actually April of 1956. So yeah.
Coming on.
Yeah. So 69 years.
Wow. That is amazing. What does the business do now? I'm guessing the business kind of evolved over time, but what are you all doing now?
There's been a huge evolution over time, but right now we are in what I would call the specialty finishes category of the construction industry. We've got crews that go out and do wall covering work. So think wallpaper hangers, but our work tends to be a lot more custom specialty things. And we've got people that do what's called stretched fabric wall coverings, which are, that's kind of our bread and butter, our core business. And it centers a lot around acoustics and sound absorption. So, those are the kind of the general things that people bring us in on, is whether it's for the look and decoration of what we do, but often centering around acoustics and sound absorption.
And we're talking commercial type construction.
Yeah, we do a little bit of residential work. That's not a focus, but we do that primarily, yes, commercial construction, corporate tenant improvements or build out of corporate spaces is the biggie, but we get into institutional work like schools and the Oregon State Capitol and churches and recording studios. It's a pretty wide gamut of what we do. Corporate interiors would be the day in, day out.
Got it. Y'all are located generally in the Seattle area. Your office is located in Everett. So are you working primarily in the Pacific Northwest?
We've got our offices here just north of Seattle, where we've got warehouse and our crews work out of. We've also got a small office and warehouse down in Vancouver, Washington, that serves the Portland and Oregon market. 90% of our work is up and down the I-5 corridor. But all over Washington and Oregon, we've got a large project coming up in Alaska. We occasionally go to Idaho, Montana, even down into Utah and Arizona. And we've done some international work as well.
Where have you gone? I'm curious.
We've done a little bit of work just up in Vancouver, BC, but we've also been in Switzerland. And we did a project a few years back in India.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, kind of fun to do those and to say the words, but logistically and profitability that are
there
on the list.
So how big is the company?
Right now, I would say our total employment, full-time people, is about 35.
How did you start out in the business? What was your entree? Why are you here?
My father started the business, and I was working down in Portland at a job that I thought was going to give me a better opportunity, and I, after a few months there, realized it was not. And I was up in Seattle visiting my wife and I, and Mount St. Helens erupted. Well, we were in Portland, sitting out on the deck watching the eruption. Actually, I guess I'd have to back up, because the eruption happened. Then it was the second time when the ash blew over, went west and over the freeway, and we were in Seattle. And so after spending a few extra days here, instead of driving through the ash, I was talking with my dad. And my dad said, I was telling him about the job I had, that I was disappointed in where it was going. He was telling me about some of the directions of the company. And a few days later, when I was back in Portland, he called and said, what would you think of just coming to work for me? And let's see if we can turn this thing around and make something out of kind of the bones of what I've got. And I didn't have anything to lose. And 2 weeks later, I was in Seattle.
Wow. And how old were you then?
I was actually 20 years old because I didn't turn 21 until about 4 months later.
Okay. So what did you start doing? What was your first job or role, or what were you doing?
What really started it is my father and my mother had been introduced to the concept of fabric walls and fabric wall panels, or this thing we call stretch fabric walls, and a product known as Fabric Track. It's the brand name of what we still use primarily today. He kind of he knew he was onto something, but wasn't quite sure what to do and what to do with it. And that's what he hired me to do, is to say, let's figure this thing out. And that's what we did. Even from the Fabric Track company, they were newer, and they were kind of feeling their way along too. So, I'm kind of like one of, call it the, I don't know, founding members of the Fabritrack network,
Got it. Okay.
that kind of figured this thing out and got it established. And the first couple of years were rocky, but then as we really got our footing, learned how to sell and market this product, that we started getting a foothold and took it from there.
Do you remember a time where there was like a turning point where you were like, hey, we just landed this deal. Seems like this is a deal that's going to work.
I think, yeah, I believe the year was about 1983. So 1983 is when we really kind of got the foothold, figured this thing out, determined who really our customer and our marketplace was. And it was about 84 and 85. There was two projects that really were the turning point. I believe the first one of those was the Tacoma Convention Center.
Okay.
And that was, even today, that would have been considered a nice sized job for us, not a huge job. Back then it was like, I remember standing in the grand ballroom down there looking at how are we going to get this done?
Wow.
And the other one happened about that same point in time was the Washington State Capitol building. We did the House and Senate chambers down there, and started as kind of a moderate project, and over a year or two turned into a pretty nice project. And what's interesting is I still see our work even today when when I'm watching the news on the TV. Those two projects were probably the turning point that helped us to then make the next steps and get better recognition, better confidence of other customers to take us to another level.
What were the growth milestones that you remember? A lot of folks that listen to the podcast are business owners. And I think one of the things that a lot of us business owners are very keenly aware of is when to bring on additional help.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of curious, was there any secret to your success there, or what can you tell us about that?
Interesting question. Let me kind of start from a slightly different angle.
Sure, yeah.
Is one of the things I know about myself is I'm not a great delegator. Never have been, still am not. And when you're not a good delegator, bringing on other people has a special challenge to it, because along with not being a good delegator is this thing which a lot of us small business owners have, is letting go of something. You've
Yeah.
got this grip. And when you let go of something, you're now at the mercy of that other person of, what if they mess this up? What if they cost me a bunch of money? What if they put me out of business? So I guess, with having said that, that hiring people has come a little bit more painfully.
The delivery side.
That's not been a problem, because in fact, for me, because we're in construction and I'm all thumbs, the crews we have now know to keep me off of a job site.
Got it.
So that's never been a problem. And
Yeah.
we've done a great job of building up crews. The greater difficulty has been sales
Hmm.
and operations.
Okay.
It took me a long time to finally hire the right sales staff. I think where maybe I failed was in some of the hiring process. When I went to work for my father, obviously he owned the business, and my wife was brought into the business, Diane, a few years later. And it was in 1999 that we bought the business from my
Okay.
father. So it was really the juncture that it became our baby, our problem. Before, really, I was number two, and the buck didn't stop with me. And there's a certain relief to that. As soon as it's yours, there's this weight that jumps onto your shoulders. Things mentally can start to become a bit more challenging.
Yeah.
But it was right also in that juncture that we were able to start recruiting, training a sales staff. Prior to that, the sales mostly came down to me running the business and all the various things that you got to do in running the business and selling. So the turning point really a sales staff that kind of got, yes, sales manager was still a hat, but not going out and actually conducting the sales process
Yeah.
myself,
Mm.
other than in training, really made a big difference. It also became the easiest thing for me to start to offload so that I could focus on other things of growing the business.
Got it. I'm reading this book. It's called Buy Back Your Time. It's for entrepreneurs like us and just exactly what you're talking about. Nobody's going to do it as good as we will, especially the sales. I'm that way right now too. And his mantra is something that you do that is not the highest value in the organization done by somebody else, 80% as good as you would do it is 100% freaking awesome. He's Canadian, so he says 100% freaking awesome. So it's kind of a cool concept. He's like, if somebody else did it to 80%, it's 100% better.
And I think for us entrepreneurs, just the whole delegation and understanding that even if somebody has done something that you think, dang it, I could have done that better, is to understand that's because you can't do it all.
Yeah, nor should you want to.
Because maybe the sales aspect is probably my stronger aspect of this company. And one might think that's what I should have focused on and hired people to do other things. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily argue that. However, it also became the thing that was easiest for me to train.
Oh, right. Yeah, good point.
I'm okay as an operational. I'm terrible on the production side, as I said, but as an operational person, I do fine. I can hold my own. But because I'm only okay, it's also a little bit more difficult to train somebody. And when you're at that juncture, you kind of have these decisions to make. Gee, do I, spend the big bucks to really bring somebody in who's an operational expert, which in our case would have cost a lot of money and still might have had a miss. In my case, the logic slash fear slash decision was let's hire and train for what I know. I also firmly believe what was it? Maybe it was Zig Ziglar that said, nothing happens until something is sold.
That's right. Got to put gas in the tank. My background is sales as well. You can have a finely tuned race car sitting on the track, and if there's no gas in the tank, it's not going anywhere. And that gas is sales.
I still lead our sales team. The briefer of what's happened here just over the last couple of years. First of all, Sam, my son,
Mm-hmm.
now owns the company.
Okay.
I work for him.
Got it.
I draw a paycheck just like everybody else these days.
Hey,
Uh,
that must be nice, as a business. Yeah.
but of course, we didn't give the company to him. We
Sure.
sold the company to him, and
Yeah.
he's signed on the dotted line for a very sizable amount of money. And I have a vested interest in making sure that he is able to
Yeah.
pay.
Meet the obligations. Yes.
Yeah, the general idea is I'm just now kind of starting to wind things down, take a little bit more time off, and so forth. And that will happen gradually over a couple of years.
Yeah.
I still lead the sales team. The organization and dynamics of that have changed greatly over the last couple of years. What I do is lead them and help them and guide them, and just now kind of starting to think and plan about how I hand that off to my son. We've got a full-time operations manager who's doing a great job, and they're the team that's leading this company into the future.
We can't have this interview without mentioning the patriarch, Don. Just so you know, I'll be at the golf course here locally we have this thing in the summer. It's called Dawn Patrol on Friday mornings. And so we're out golfing at 5:15, 5:30. And guess who comes bombing by us in his golf cart by himself? It's your dad at 91.
He just turned 92.
92. So he's shooting his age and living life to the fullest. So he's one of my heroes. So I gotta just mention that. But having mentioned that, and obviously just having a sense of what a stronger personality, I would say, is or has been, perhaps. Were there any lessons that you took from that transition when you and Diane bought the company in 99, and then now you're kind of in the other shoes on the other foot here? Were there any things that you're like, oh, could do that a little different? Or, and I don't think Don's going to listen to the podcast. Maybe he will, but
You never know, he might. In fact, just last night, the thought occurred to me, maybe you should have done one with my dad and then with me.
yeah, there we go. Well, there's always time.
Yeah. So when all of the transition happened, my father was 65 and obviously looking to get out and retire and whatever. The business, which had been very successful in years prior, was, let's say, kind of on a little bit more rocky ground at that point in time. I think perhaps some delayed decisions on some changes led to things not being as good as they had been in the past. There was a period of time there. We were kind of in a more of a headbutting mode, where previous to that, we weren't. Even on the occasions that I might have disagreed with decisions, hey, he was the boss, he was the owner. Okay, fine. Do as the owner says. But as we were in this transition, prior to really even talk about a purchase, we started maybe a little bit of headbutting. Then once all this purchase thing started to happen, and the idea was for him to hang around for a little bit longer, the headbutting grew. It has been inside of 60 days that my father told me something he had never told me before, which is he had reached a point he just needed out. He wanted to be gone. And maybe I simply failed to recognize that. He certainly never verbalized it, of course.
Yeah.
Possibly I could have recognized it. What is the purpose of that? One of the things that I've been very clear about with Sam and Danielle, that's his right hand, so that team, I've told them this individually, I've told them this together, is when they reach a point that they think I'm being any kind of a problem or any kind of an interference or whatever, and it's time for me to go. Tell me. Okay. And it is because of that transition with my father. I'm
Mm,
trying to make sure that I've set the stage that, guys, you don't have to tiptoe around it. If something's not going right here
yeah.
and you'd need me out of the way, say so. Let's
So
do it.
let's not walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for any of those making transitions on either end is to have good open conversation about that. And maybe people who don't recognize things about themselves, which my father really didn't about at that juncture. He didn't grasp some of the challenges he was giving, not just to me, but other people in the company,
Yeah.
because he wanted out, but yet we didn't know he wanted it.
Well, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's good. A company doesn't last 69, 70 years. That's
Well, yeah.
amazing. And your brand in the market, it's a specialty brand, but within the trades and within the architects and the commercial building in Seattle.
Yeah.
So
Well, and thank you for that. And that's, of course, something that we've worked hard at and been strategic at with our customer base. Yeah.
any advice that you have for folks that are in your position or are potentially in your position that you were in a few years ago when you decided to make the move with respect to the ownership of your business? Just any tips or thoughts on that?
Pay close attention to accounting.
Okay.
Have a trusted CPA looking over your shoulders that is helping you to set up processes and help keep you out of trouble. And yes, those people cost money, but it's money well spent. I think I know too many businesses that have gone out of business either because of improprieties inside their organization or letting their customers get out of control and run their business financially. Pay close attention to the accounting and look at it daily if you can, particularly obviously with computer programs, certainly weekly. Look over
Yeah.
your books, make sure, if something happens to not look right, dig into it because unfortunately your gut is probably right.
Sure.
Yeah, that is one to really pay attention to. The other that I guess maybe it really took me a long time to learn, and I'll go back to when my wife and I began in our ownership of this company and that weight is that as seriously as you need to take running your business, don't take don't take it too serious. Laugh, joke, try to relax, and above all, be kind. Even just in the last couple of days, we've got some, let's just say, challenging jobs that we're working on. And I guess first I'll say, no, we haven't done anything wrong, but we've had some customers that have chosen to chew us out, yell at us, and whatever. And I've just learned to, doesn't matter, be kind,
Mm-hmm.
be patient, regardless.
Yeah.
As hard as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same, I mean, I mentioned customers, but the same with employees too.
Yeah.
Be kind, even when you have to be aggressive about mistakes or training or retraining or whatever it is, you still can be aggressive and be kind.
We have a rule that's called, and I learned it from somebody else a long time ago, no client bashing. So we cannot sit in a meeting amongst ourselves and just make fun of our customers. It's not,
Well,
we'd love to sometimes, but that's the rule. So we can't do it.
yeah, I think we had the line came out last week in a discussion that if it just wasn't for those doggone customers, I think
Exactly.
it'd be fine.
No kidding. Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, Mark, I really appreciate your time and insights, and I know we're just kind of scratching the surface of what you've done and what you've learned, but I really appreciate your insights, and this has been really enjoyable. I learned a lot today that I didn't know about the company.
Yeah. All right.
Good stuff.
Cool. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks for having me.
You bet. It'll probably be early June when this
All
will
right.
be out. So
Very good.
appreciate it. Hey, you have a great day.
All right. You too. Take care.
See ya.